welcome back. We're here for another episode of The Incongruent, and I'm joined by Arjun once again. Arjun, thank you very much for being here. Who did we speak to today?
So today we spoke to Tamara Laine. She is an award-winning, Emmy award-winning journalist turned fintech founder and a business growth strategist and a podcast host herself.
Yeah. And we've been brilliant. We were really lucky to talk to her. She was talking to us about providing financial services to the unbanked and underbanked, and in particular the gig economy, which is now apparently 50% of the US economy. This service is only in America right now, but hopefully going further abroad. So it's great. So Arjun, would you like to set us off?
Absolutely. Let's hit it.
Wait. That's not what I say. It's let's go.
Let's go. Hello and welcome to a brand new episode of Incongruent. So today we are going to talk to an Emmy award-winning journalist, a fintech founder, and a business growth strategist. Her name is Tamara Laine. She is the founder and CEO of MPWR, where she is transforming how credit and capital are accessed by gig workers, women, and underserved communities through AI and alternative data. A former gig worker herself, Tamara brings lived experience to her mission of building a more inclusive financial system. She has launched and scaled 8-figure tech ventures and is a recognized expert in financial inclusion, ethical tech, and economic innovation. Tamara also co-hosts What's the Frack, a podcast on startup growth. So Tamara, welcome on the show.
Thank you for having me.
I'm very curious, from a journalist to a fintech CEO, how your career bridges storytelling and system changes, and how do you keep the human story, the person behind data, at the heart of innovation?
Yeah, well, that's a loaded question. That's like three questions in one. So I should start with, what brought me to being a fintech founder and how does that relate to being an investigative journalist for the first part of my career? And really, the line is very clear to me. When I started my career as an investigative journalist, it was about rooting out problems that affect people and how do you solve them, right? It's either finding someone who's solving them or myself as a journalist finding that the dots that come together to create a solution and putting that into the public. And so as a startup founder, you're doing the exact same thing. You are identifying a critical problem and you're creating a solution yourself through a product that then you're going to serve to as many people as possible. And so, when I look at that journey, it's very clear to me how I went from investigative journalist to startup founder.
Okay.
You also had two other questions in there. So how do I find the human, the human storytelling through it? Which, storytelling, I think, is just a part of my DNA. It's something that I think is innately human, right? Like throughout history, storytelling has been the number one thing that brings people together. That that also, brings children to understand their community. It passes along education. Storytelling is the thread that binds us all together as a society. And myself, as a storyteller from the beginning, I understand how important that story is when you're creating a product in the relationship that a person has with that product, right? If it doesn't hit you emotionally that you need something, you're not going to use it. And so that's the basis of all products is the story that brought you to it and the story that keeps you there, which is the why, the how, and then the ending, which is the solution that it brings to you.
All right, and the last part of that question, the third part of that question.
I was a long question. That's what I said.
Steve, you wanted to?
Yeah. What was the third part of the question then? Go on then.
The third part is basically the person behind the data at the heart of innovation. So with how do you keep with the human story and that part and connect that human story to the heart of innovation?
Well, I think that's the struggle that all founders have, right? Because you
Mm-hmm.
get stuck in the creation. So you find the problem, and which
Mm-hmm.
is kind of your why, and then you come up with the how, which is I'm going to build this product, and then that human story is the part that's the most complicated because it's who you're creating it for and how they interact with it, right? And how do you keep that at the heart of it? Is the largest challenge that any startup founder and actually any company has, because you think, as you're creating it, you're moving fast. You're
Mm-hmm.
creating the solution that you think. And if you don't have those feedback loops, which is probably one of my favorite things to talk about, you can lose that human-centered aspect of the technology that you're creating, because you're not creating it for you. You're creating it for others to use. And so in order to keep that, you really do have to create systems that give you feedback and put yourself in the place to get feedback on your product so that you're not creating in a silo, so that you are putting the human in the center of it. And as AI, which I know we're going to talk about a lot of that is about not only creating your feedback, but your moments of keeping a human in the loop. Right. So I'm creating agentic technology. And so the idea is that an agent should be able to go out and do something. But we believe that a human needs to be in the loop and in control during the whole thing. Right. So we create moments that are engineered to keep the human at the center. Sorry.
So
That to keep the human.
that's a good point. But before we go into that depth of technology, maybe let's good chance to talk about what Empower is and what it does, and then we can and then we can talk about the agentic because that's really quite advanced and exciting stuff.
Absolutely. So you would like me to tell you about Empower and what we're doing at Empower?
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. If you don't mind, that would be great. Just to give us a nutshell so we can see where we are. It's something to do with gig working, as far as I've read.
Yeah. So, well, Empower is a new agentic ecosystem for lenders to understand thin filed users, which are gig workers, caregiver economy, newly arrived people to different places that have a a less full credit history, right? And actually, if we think about it, that's the new generation, right? The Gen Z, what the new economy is doing is interacting with the financial system in a completely new way. And so what we need to do is we need to reinvent how that financial system interacts with people. And at Empower, we're starting with lending to people who are traditionally left out of the financial system. So gig workers are a huge part of that because they don't make a W-2, they don't have traditional income streams. And so the way that we understand them traditionally excludes them from accessing the type of credit, the type of loans that people who have a W-2, who have a consistent income stream, have been able to get. So now we're leveraging AI, deep learning and agentic systems to create a better way for gig workers, for the caregiving economy, to access credit and capital. And so I'm thrilled about it because it's something I'm very passionate about, working, as a gig worker myself for half of my career and understanding the huge pain point that that has on being able to financially thrive.
So this is helping the unbanked and underbanked gain access to financial services, and it's in America exclusively.
Right now, we're launching in America, but that's our first market.
Excellent stuff. So from there, you mentioned you're going to use AI to help with this. How exactly does that work? We've talked in other episodes about blockchain. I'm assuming there might be some blockchain involved in here.
Well, no. So we don't leverage blockchain. What we do is we've got a way of accessing really um, disparate financial information coming from a lot of different sources and bringing it together and sorting through it in a way that creates easy to understand models. So a lot of our financial system doesn't communicate. So what we're doing is we're creating a way for it to communicate and understand the whole person, and then our agents take that information and help the borrower and help the bank move through that lending process.
So, what kind of information data points are you collecting?
I mean, we're collecting hundreds of different data points. But the main ones that really help gig workers that you can think of are traditionally banks look at your lending history, right? The debts that you have. And so if you think about that, that's like a mortgage, that's student loans, that's credit cards. But a lot of the new economy, they don't have mortgages, right? They don't have a lot of credit cards. They rent, they have utility bills, they have um several different income streams. So we're able to pull in that information and create a holistic credit profile of someone.
So that relies on the credibility and the quality of the sources that you're using. And if I'm a gig worker and I'm receiving cash, maybe cash in hand in some instances, how are you overcoming? How are you verifying the sources of information?
So the sources of information come directly from different institutions, right? And so we're verifying direct from the source. So we can see bank data, we can see utility data, we can see renting data, we can see secondary loans, we can see automobile loans.
Excellent. Okay. So you talked about we've talked about that one. So what do you think are the biggest misconceptions that the traditional financial institutions still have about the gig economy? It's not a new thing anymore. This has become business work as usual, right? In the past, it was if you were off outside of work and you're in one of these jobs, it was considered you're almost like a second or third class citizen in some respects. But now this is the way of life forever. So, what legacy falsehoods or used to be truths have now become false that need to be overcome?
Well, I mean, the gig economy, when I say gig workers, I'm sure most people think that's your Uber driver, right? But in the US, it's 50% of the workforce. The gig economy spans from your Uber driver to your Airbnb host to your fractional CMO that has five different clients and is, not making a traditional W-2, but is leveraging their, C-suite knowledge to work, but also travel and live the way they want to. The new generation of workers is mostly gig workers, gig economy, and that's only growing. And so the major misconception is that the gig economy is, like you said, like kind of this secondary class. And that is not the case. The gig economy is nearing the majority of the workforce.
Okay, Arjun, do you have the next question?
Yeah, sure. So I want to ask now, you have won an Emmy for reporting on ethical AI. How does that experience influence the way you and your team design and deploy AI within Empower?
I mean, it has a huge effect on the way that I work and design. And so, from the very beginning, I was one of the early people reporting on ethical AI. I did the story back in 2017, got the Emmy, I believe, in 2018. Back then I was talking to a lot of ethicists who were talking about, how AI was going to, when it came out, be incredibly explosive and powerful with rapid growth. And so that's why they were trying to get ahead of it with putting in more regulations and more codes of ethics. That hasn't happened. But for myself, what I see is, and I really took with me, is the importance of diversity of thought and diversity of inclusion when designing systems like these because of how powerful they are. If you don't have more people creating the technology, it is very easy to leave people out or to have systems that do harm versus do no harm because they leave out critical things that, you know, um, certain groups wouldn't think of, right? If it's an only male group creating technology, it leaves out different things that could happen to women, right? You think about that would be huge in healthcare. When we talk about security and the security technology that's coming out leveraging AI, when you have only white people designing it, it can have terrible effects on people who have darker skin. And so, therefore, when you're creating technology, you have to have a diverse group in the room to talk about it, to talk about the implications, to talk about the effects of it. Otherwise, you could be creating something in a silo that has effects that were unintended.
Again, I did the classic technologically challenged move, which is muting myself and talking. uh, Again, conscious of the time, so I'm just going to straight away shoot over to my next question. You've scaled eight-figure tech ventures from a founder's lens. What's the most powerful lever, technology, policy, or storytelling, for driving true economic inclusion?
Storytelling and community. So you could have the best technology in the world if you don't have a good story. If you don't have the storytelling and community, the adoption rate is going to be painfully slow. And so you have to be able to communicate the power of your technology. Back before I was a founder, I worked with a lot of startups and founders, and my great skill was being able to boil down complex issues into really simple to understand. Because as a newscaster, I was doing that. I was doing investigative journalism, and then doing a minute 30-second stories. And so the most critical thing is the storytelling and community, because if you don't have that, you are going to have the hardest time lifting your fantastic technology off the ground.
Steve, you're muted. Uh,
I'm supposed to be. Sorry, I'm back. Sorry, the space bar should work. I'm trying to use the space bar so it doesn't create an echo. Sometimes we can all let it do some. So I was just saying, building on what you've just talked about, I'm looking now at the communities, and the current community in the UK, where I am now, is terrified of AI. It really is not very positive. So how do you encourage people who, let's face it, they probably haven't. I mean, apart from the fractional people like myself, if you just entered a new entrant into a country, or you're going out of university, you don't have financial literacy. Even if you have my lack of hair, you still get scammed. So people are concerned about this, and AI is also something people are scared about. How do you convince them that AI is going to be trustworthy?
Well, one thing I should say is I'm really excited for the UK because they've just implemented universal education of financial fluency for students, which is phenomenal. And it's such a great step. And I wish more countries would do that. I wish the US would do that. I've worked on that for a long time. But when you talk about AI and like some of the things that are concerning about it, you are absolutely right. Like deep fakes and AI and scamming is a very big problem. And so there's good reason to be skeptical of that. And that's why you have to use trusted systems, right? Um, you know, new movers will have a harder time with adoption for AI. Um, but that's okay because the hockey stick is moving up with adoption. So you have to know the platform, you need to trust the platform. That's where partnerships are really important with new technology. And then people are trying out all sorts of different AI technologies. It's about just making sure that you're well versed on what they're connected to, what security and information and privacy you are accepting when you sign up for them. And then, make sure you're educated on it. That's a hard thing to say, but like it's important. AI is here, it's growing. Education needs to be a large part of that.
Uh, A final question then. What happens in 10 years' time? Where do you see this all going? Everyone is probably going to become gig workers. At least 70-80% of us are going to be gig workers as we get grayer and the economies become older and older. What role should AI play in that transition? Where do you see it playing?
Well, see, now I see the gig economy as a really phenomenal thing, an area of freedom, right? An area of choosing your own choice of what work you want to do and how you want to do it and where you want to do it. You know, since COVID, the way that we work and interact and are able to choose our own schedules has become very liberating for a lot of people. And so that movement I see progressing and becoming very positive. Now, the interaction of AI with that, where I see AI going is I see AI becoming something for productivity. I do not see it removing people from careers. I see it changing the way that we work and that the skills that we need changing. I'm doing a lot of work on the importance of emotional intelligence in leadership. So soft skills are going to become important. Remember, learning history, learning the arts, learning humanities is going to become something that takes precedent over maybe doing STEM anymore because you got the tools to do math, and to do science, but the soft skills of art and are going to become highly relevant, especially when it comes to creating AI products. And so in 10 years, I mean, I see productivity being a major area where AI will help people and then help free up time. Now, I hope my goal is that it helps free up time. What I've noticed is with the boom of AI, most founders, most people seem like they're um, short on time because there's so much to learn, so much to do. Like, I think in this moment, AI has not helped us with productivity. It's kind of complicated a lot of things until you figure out how to leverage it. So we're in a moment of transition, but where I see it moving is that it should help us and enable us to live some better quality lives.
Brilliant. Well, thank you very much. I think, Arjun, that's our time. Do you want to close us down?
Yeah, sure. Thank you so much, Tamara, for coming in and kind of sharing that story. And to all those listeners out there, thank you so much for tuning on to another episode of Incongruent. Please do like, share, and subscribe as our podcasts are available across your favorite podcast platforms. Until next time, this is the entire crew, myself and Steve and Tamara, signing off. Goodbye.